when the producers of Law & Order seem to weave into their dialogue of their show almost every week disparaging, misleading comments about the Tea Party, we need to call them out. And we need to say to them, stop discriminating against people who have different views. That's not very liberal. That's not very open-minded. So today I'm hoping that we can truly have some open mind. Are there any liberals here today? Is there anybody here who considers themselves liberal? Classical liberals? Well, that's great, because I'm hoping that you'll listen to today's speakers with an open mind. You'll consider what they have to say. And despite what the media and the producers of Law & Order and the Democrat Party in Massachusetts say about us, that you will listen to what they have to say and you'll make up your own mind. Our first speaker today is Jim Wallace. Jim Wallace has been the executive director of the Gun Owners Action League of Massachusetts. He served his country in the United States Army from 1983 to 1986. Let's have a round of applause for that. Thank you for your service, Jim. Before becoming the executive director of GOAL, Jim founded the Massachusetts Society of Outdoor Sportsmen and was the president of the Essex County League of Sportsmen. As the executive director of GOAL, Jim continues to steer important legislation protecting the rights of the Commonwealth sportsmen and gun owners. And he continues to protect those rights from being usurped unnecessarily by restrictive licensing and regulatory processes. Jim has been instrumental in helping to shape legislation to create a more streamlined and more fair gun licensing system here in Massachusetts. He's fought to protect gun clubs and shooting ranges from costly compliant measures and enabled the sale of competitive target shooting handguns, clarified the law regarding transportation and usage of loaded firearms, and most recently, Jim advocated stopping efforts to restrict handgun sales in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts to 1 gun per month. Jim is a very strong, well-spoken, accomplished, and effective advocate for gun owners, sportsmen, and defenders of the Second Amendment to the Constitution here in Massachusetts. Most importantly, unlike a lot of us who go to Tea Party meetings, listen to speakers, and then go home, Jim actually does stuff. He actually does things. He actually gets involved. He actually becomes active. And because of that, I can't think of a better guy to start off our Boston Tea Party rally today than Gun Owners Action League President Jim Wallace. Oh, you can do better than that. Jim Wallace!
Here's that $20 bill I promised you. How's everybody doing today? Well, you can't do any better than that. He's got to hear you up there. Come on, how's everybody doing today? All right, let's get warmed up a little bit. All right? A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state shall not be. All right, that's what I want to hear. You know, I've had a lot of people actually tell me that, you know, Jim, that thing's kind of outdated. We don't really need that kind of stuff anymore. After all, when's the last time a militia was used, you know, to save anybody in the United States?
Yesterday!
Well, the government just found out yesterday in a little place called Nevada what the militia is all about. When a group of armed citizens store right down at a government agency and said, no, you will not take his land, you will not take his livestock, you will not take his way to make a living simply because he owes you a little money. Because if that was the way things worked, we'd own that building up there. So it's a little interesting, but I want to tell you about a few other things that are happening right here in this state. We have a little problem here. You know, this is the birthplace of freedom. And unfortunately, when I talk around the country and people ask me that, you know, Jim, that's, you know, Massachusetts, that's the birthplace of freedom. And I said, well, yeah, but you kind of left off the last end. Right now, this is the birthplace of freedom's death, because that's exactly what's starting to happen here in this state. And I want to tell you, as far as the Second Amendment goes, believe it or not, we have a chief of police up in Lowell right now. Where's Bettina Romberg, by the way? Bettina, raise your hand. Say everybody that's Bettina. Bettina took it upon herself to go meet with a chief that only issues restricted licenses. And she met with a group of women, and the police chief And he said, well, we only issue licenses to people who own business, are in law enforcement, or have been a victim of violent crime. Can we go over that third one, please? Isn't that what the Second Amendment is supposed to prevent? But you want us to be a victim first. Okay, now let's move on to the police commissioner in Springfield. When he was asked about loosening the restrictions on issuing unrestricted licenses out in Springfield, he said, studies have shown that it's better to be an effective witness than an armed responder. Okay, let's play out this scenario. Which is better? I'm walking down the street of Springfield. I see a young lady getting mugged. I draw my .38 and say, sir, you need to stop that. I'll dial 911 while you're on the ground, and the police will come and take you away. Scenario number two. I'm walking down the street in Springfield. I see a young lady getting mugged, and I go over and say, sir, how much do you weigh? Okay. How tall are you? Stop hitting me, I'm trying to get information here. So while I'm laying on the street looking like the girlfriend of Gerald Remy, I'm supposed to be a better person. Who, by the way, if that young lady did not live in a state that discouraged self-help, would be looking forward to Easter dinner, and that steroid-raged scumbag would be in a pine box where he belongs. Now, not too far away from here, we had a very solemn event at the Boston Marathon. And, you know, I guess we should, usually at this time, people call for a moment of silence for the victims and everybody else. I think instead what we ought to do is for those victims so they hear us, and even those who can't hear us, and those citizens who acted as first responders, I think we ought to give a big round of applause for everybody that's going to be back here on Patriots Day to run the marathon again, because we have told those who want to hold us back and destroy the American way of life, hell no! But I do want to mention that horrible day when we all saw law enforcement come out in droves, because one of the things I get asked all the time is, Jim, why do you need a large capacity magazine to exercise your Second Amendment civil right? After all, you really don't need those things here in Massachusetts. Well, God bless law enforcement and everything they do, but I'll tell you, one of the things I witnessed the next day, it looked like the 2nd Armored Cavalry coming down the street. That wasn't civilian law enforcement. Why do we have law enforcement that needs tanks? As far as I'm concerned, we need to readdress that. But anyway, when you look at large capacity magazines, when they actually cornered that kid in a boat, how many rounds went down range into that boat and the kids still come out of the boat going, hi? Well, maybe that should teach something. Oh, by the way, if anybody actually looked at the logistics and the positioning of where law enforcement was in the boat they were shooting up, here's law enforcement. There's the boat they were shooting up, and here was the staging ground for the media. I'm not too sure who set that up, but oh my Lord. So, you know, there's a lot of things we need to look at as far as what we progress. Now, as far as things like large capacity magazines, they are the number one thing that every defensive entity has in this country. If you look at the FBI, you look at the CIA, you look at local law enforcement, what's the one thing they have in common? They all carry large capacity magazines. Why? It's the best defensive entity. If that's the case, why would my government want to reduce my ability to defend myself? If somebody happens to break into my house, and my wife is there alone, and yes, she has a license to carry, and she empties 2 magazines center mass into that criminal, and she's in the court the next day, and the judge says, Mrs. Wallace, why did you feel the need to empty 2 magazines into your attacker? Because, Your Honor, I didn't own a third. I'll go out tomorrow and buy one. How's that? That's the way we need to start treating attackers here in Massachusetts and across this country. Because we are the lawful people. We are the legal ones. All right? Now, here's the other thing I've been approached with. How many people have heard of this fingerprinting technology that'll make handguns work for only one person? Yeah, unreliable's right. You know what? It's so unreliable. When I was called by the press, I said, well, let's experiment first. Let's have some of the top handgun users try it first. And they said, who would that be? I said, let's start with the Secret Service and see how it goes from there. So far, they haven't gotten back to me. But anyway, wait, I got to do a Marco Rubio. Here, hold on. Whenever I speak in public, I drink pure, clean Marco Rubio water. Anyway, people still remember that. That's funny. But anyway, we've got a long ways to go here. Just last week, we did have a very small victory. And up on Beacon Hill, they debated the domestic violence legislation. And Gun Owners Action League, with the help of Representative Kim Ferguson and a lot of others, actually got the pepper spray language into that domestic violence bill. For those of you who don't know, Massachusetts is currently the only state in the nation that licenses pepper spray. Can you imagine that? We license a spice. Anybody ever been to Texas and Arizona and had chili down there? Dang, if you want to license something, license some of that. Because that'll burn a hole from your throat right through your backside before you even blink. That stuff ought to be licensed. But in Massachusetts, it's actually 2 years in jail to carry pepper spray without a license. The other day, we were up at the State House. We filed it as an amendment to get rid of that stupid license so anyone over the age of 18 could carry pepper spray, man, woman, whatever, college campuses, you name it. And I got to give them credit. That amendment passed 142-0. We just inverted the Kool-Aid. They didn't know it. But that's all right. We got it done. Anyway, ladies and gentlemen, Gun Owners Action League's been around for 40 years. This is our 40th anniversary. Still alive and kicking in the state of Massachusetts. 16,000 members strong, 140 affiliated organizations across the state. We plan on being here for a long time. And what we need to do is bring the respect of civil rights, of all civil rights, back to the state of Massachusetts and back to this country. Ladies and gentlemen, let's kick it off. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Jim. Another round of applause for Jim, man who served his country. Our next speaker is going to be Terry Schilling. He's the political director of American Principles in Action. Again, another guy who doesn't just go to meetings, listen to speakers, and then go home. He actually does stuff. And that's important if this Tea Party movement is going to grow and we're going to succeed. Terry's a native of Geneseo. Did I say that right? Thank you. I practiced that all night last night. Geneseo, Illinois, and he is a graduate of the Franciscan University of Steubenville, where he studied political science. Terry is responsible for developing and implementing the organization's political strategy at both the state and the federal level. In the past, Terry has worked in communications, development, grassroots, and management positions with Rep. Chris Smith of New Jersey, Senator Sam Brownback, as well as various other state and local candidates. Before joining the team of APIA, Terry managed his father's race for Congress in Illinois, running against a 30-year entrenched incumbent on a shoestring budget in 2010. Terry led the Bobby Schilling for Congress campaign to a 10-point victory in Illinois. That deserves applause. Why didn't you guys applaud for that? This is an audience participation rally. I'm expecting a lot more from you guys. During college, Terry served as vice president of his student government association and is the director of grassroots operations for college Republicans. Let's give it up for a big Tea Party welcome to Terry Schilling.
Hi everyone. Like Tom said, my name's Terry, and I'm from Washington, and I'm here to help. In all honesty, I work for this group. We were founded 5 years ago. It's called the American Principles in Action. And we're not just a think tank. We're an action-oriented group that works with activists on the ground moms and dads, people who haven't typically been involved politically before, and we train them, we give them the necessary tools and resources that they need to win at the state legislatures and their local government to reclaim their government back for them and their children. So we've been fighting these special interests who have basically been waging war on the founding principles of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness for the past 5 years. We've been fighting against Common Core since its inception, and we've been leading that fight from day one. All that we seek to do is this. It's very simple. We want to give moms and dads, local teachers, the knowledge, the know-how, and the tools that they have or that they need to fight Common Core in their state legislators or state legislatures. Before working at APIA, I didn't know what Common Core was. I know that I had heard Arnie Duncan, the Secretary of Education, talking about rigorous, uniform, internationally benchmarked standards that were being led by the states. They were also promising not to lower the expectations of students. It seemed like they were saying, if you like your education standards, you can keep your education standards. And that got me thinking. Usually when Washington says something, they mean the exact opposite. If you like your doctor, you can keep your doctor. If you like your health care, you can keep your health care. Everyone ever heard of the Affordable Care Act? So I started looking into it, and I found out that almost all of this information was false. These standards were internationally benchmarked. They weren't rigorous. Well, they were rigorous if you consider confusing standards that don't make any sense are rigorous. They weren't state-led. That is, unless you count special interests as being states. The more I learned about the Common Core, the more my heart trembled for my country and my 2 daughters. I learned that there were massive privacy issues with the Common Core, and that my children's data would be shared with corporations across the country. I also learned that Common Core wasn't an education model, it was a workforce development model that sought to turn our children into cogs in a machine. At what point did our children become human capital? I thought this was America, and that the point of our education system was to mold our children into critical thinkers, productive, moral, ethical, and faithful citizen leaders. How could this have happened all so quickly? You know what the answer is? Because they cut parents, teachers, and in some cases, state legislators and governors out of the picture. They use bureaucrats and lobbyists to get this done. So what does Common Core actually do? Well, let's start with the math standards. Common Core relies on fuzzy math. It only takes students to Algebra 2 by the time they graduate high school, when before students could get to calculus, which is a necessary requirement for math-related college fields. Dr. James Milgram, who was the only mathematician on the Common Core Validation Committee, rejected the math standards. You know why? Because the Common Core math standards put students 2 years behind their peers internationally by the 8th grade. If you like your math standards, you can keep your math standards. When it comes to education, Dr. Sandra Stotsky, who's by far the most well-respected authority on English language arts, criticized the English standards as being empty skill sets that weaken the basis of literary and cultural knowledge needed for authentic college coursework. Why did Sandra Stotsky say this? Because instead of relying on classical literature, Common Core focuses on informational texts. That informational text might sound great, but in fact, informational text is the most basic form of written language. It requires little to no critical thinking, and it's written for the most basic of audiences. Why should we be concerned about getting rid of classic literature and relying on informational text? Not only because classic literature has been the most proven form of education for developing truly literate students, but it's because in classic literature, students learn about good and evil, joy and grief, the nature of humanity in itself. Beyond all that, it's classic literature that catches students' interest in reading and writing. No one's going to fall in love with reading through informational texts like instruction manuals. If you like your English standards, you can keep your English standards. But I want to talk about something that truly saddens my heart, and it's right here in Massachusetts, in the story of your education system. In 1993, the Massachusetts miracle began. Republicans and Democrats sat down together to get education right. They figured out that in order to get the education system right, they needed an emphasis on classical literature, such as Moby Dick, Huck Finn, The Scarlet Letter, and To Kill a Mockingbird. And in regard to math standards, they needed to focus on the traditional math standards, not fuzzy math fads. The results that followed after this were tremendous. The students in Massachusetts performance levels went through the roof across all demographics. Massachusetts scored first in every category in the National Assessment Test. No state has ever done that before. Massachusetts also entered into the International Math Assessment Test, known as TIMSS, as its own country. And it scored in the top 10, up there with countries like Singapore. You guys had a great thing going for you. But then, it gets really sad. Instead of sticking with this Ferrari of education standards, Massachusetts opted into the Common Core in 2010 as a favorite of President Obama from Governor Deval Patrick. Thank you, yes. If the Massachusetts Miracle Standards were a Ferrari, your state traded that in for a 1985 Yugo. The special interests have declared war on our children, our future, and the founding principles that made this country great. And I want to be really clear. This wasn't Democrats or Republicans. This was special interests in both parties, waging war on our children to turn them into cogs in the machine. Who here remembers Andrew Breitbart? Everyone? If you don't remember Andrew Breitbart or know who he is, I want you to watch a movie called Hating Breitbart. It's one of the best documentaries I've ever seen. Andrew Breitbart was an American hero. He passed away 2 years ago. And this guy exposed Acorn, voter fraud, and corruption all across the country. Some people would actually say that he helped expose Anthony Weiner, but I think he did a good job exposing himself. But Andrew Breitbart once said in an interview, "I didn't start this war. Rather, they declared war on me. I'm at war with you because you declared war on me. It's that simple. If we're going to provide a better future and defend our Constitution, we're going to need to go to war with these special interests that seek to destroy our country." And you can join in that fight. You can fight this war by doing a couple things. There's a collaborative website with groups across the country called truthinamericaneducation.com. Go there, sign up. We've got tons of resources there available where you can learn about the Common Core, set up town meetings, talk to your local school boards, get them involved. You can go to fightcommoncore.com and get updates about the Common Core in your state specifically. So we all need to join in this fight this war, and let's win it. So thank you guys, and God bless America.
Thank you, Terry. A couple of years ago, we submitted at the Valley Patriot newspaper a public records request in Lawrence for some documents, and the mayor of Lawrence, the criminal mayor of Lawrence, refused to turn them over. So we filed a lawsuit against the city, and the judge ruled in our favor 4 times. 3 years later, we still didn't have the documents because Mass General Law, Chapter 66, isn't really a law. Our public records law isn't really a law. It's a suggestion. Because if any of your public officials refuse to comply with the public records law, there's no penalty. Just imagine, in this state, dominated by one party, the party that says that they care about the little guy, poor people in this state have no access to their public documents if the public officials who hold those documents don't want to give them up. So we submitted legislation that just 2 weeks ago got out of a joint House and Senate committee, unanimously, by Democrats and Republicans to put teeth into our public records law. And the bill now, if you'd like to actually do something, if you want to help, you can call your legislator and you can ask them to support House Bill HR 2846 to put teeth into our public records law. Our next speaker, Steve Aylward. Yay, Steve. He's a resident of Watertown and he's very active. Again, another guy who doesn't just go to meetings and then go home. He was the former chairman of the Watertown School Committee. He was also the founding president of the not-for-profit Watertown Cable Access Corporation. He's the treasurer and former chairman of the Watertown Republican State Committee for the 2nd Suffolk and Middlesex District. And he speaks to us today as the chairman of the committee to tank the automatic gas tax. Let's give a very warm Tea Party welcome to Steve Aylward.
Thank you very much. Thank you. I'll be brief in my remarks. Whenever someone asks me to speak and I get a round of applause, I do not think it's deserved. This was a victory for all of us, and when I'm here today and I see all these people, it's kind of like a reunion for the gas tax because I see so many people here that helped, that got the signatures. So Tom, in the theme of actually doing the work, these are the people that did the work, and I want to say thank you to all of you. Quickly, when this started, and Shauna knows this, Holly Robichaud had this idea to repeal whatever tax the legislature put forth in 2013. So Holly came to Shauna and I and a few others, Jeff Deal, and said, I want to repeal the tax. And then she said, Shauna, you know how to do this? And Shauna said, not really. And she said, Steve, you know how to do this? And I said, not really. And so we didn't really know how to go about this process of getting a ballot question done. We needed 120,000 signatures. We had no money, we had no staff, and we had to get it done in about 9 weeks. But we had a good cause, we had a great cause, but we had something even better than that. We had what Winston Churchill called an involved citizenship. And he said that an involved citizenship is the greatest asset that a country can have. And we had it. We just didn't know it, but we had it. And we don't call it the involved citizenship anymore, we call it the grassroots, or we call it the Tea Party. So it's only because of all of you that this happened. And as Tom was saying, you know, we've all been to meetings, we've all been to more meetings than we want, and some people love to bloviate, and we let them bloviate because we're nice people, but at some point we have to cut those people loose and just associate with the people that want to act, the people like you. Because what we've accomplished here is a tribute to all of you, and it is exactly what Abe Lincoln said. It's government of the people, by the people, and for the people. So that's what all of you accomplished. What I do want to say is that this tax, this automatic gas tax, is a very slimy and sleazy proposition. It's automatic. When we were collecting signatures, as a lot of you know, as soon as we said the word automatic tax increase, we stopped people in their tracks and they wanted to sign the petition. It can only go up. It's a tax that can't go down. If CPI goes down, the tax doesn't go down. If CPI goes up, the tax goes up. It's pretty convenient. However, the worst thing about it is the state really doesn't need the money. We wasted $332 million in the Crime Lab scandal, $65 million in a wasted, failed Health Connector website. We paid $93 million in mass health for illegal immigrants, $200 million in welfare fraud, $250 million in waste for MBTA maintenance. The money is not needed, but the greedy bastards want every penny that they can get, and that's why they want this to pass. They want this initiative to fail. And if they do this, the scary part of it, as all of you know, is if they can get away with this on the gas tax, they're going to do it on every single other tax. And that's why this has to be stopped. So we're going to have to go out and get 11,000 more signatures sometime in May and June, which we will do. I've always told people we can get that done before breakfast. But nobody thought we could do what we did, and we did it. It was one battle. We have a long war to fight. But we have enemies. Also, we have a group called Transportation for Massachusetts, which is out to make sure that the ballot initiative gets defeated. So what we need is we need to raise awareness. To raise awareness, we need to raise money. So we would ask that you, if you can, go to our website, www.tankthagastax.org. I put some flyers over here with Christine. If you can help us in any way to raise money, if you know of any companies, there's no restrictions on companies giving money, so they can help us that way. We really, really could use the help in that regard. We will ask for more help to get the 11,000 signatures, but it can be done. So I thank you all very much for all of your efforts in this regard, and look forward to working with you in the future.
That doesn't sound like a warm Tea Party welcome to me. Excellent. You know, a few minutes ago I was talking to you about HR 2846, which I was blessed enough to be able to write some of the language for our public records law. I gotta tell you, before I even read her bio, our next speaker is one of my favorite legislators, because she's someone who actually takes on government officials when it comes to getting public records. Her name is State Representative Shauna O'Connell. That's the kind of Tea Party welcome I was looking for. Shauna represents the 3rd Bristol District, which is much of the city of Taunton and includes a precinct in Easton and also in the county of Bristol. She's on the House Committee on Ways and Means and Ethics. Can you imagine that there's an ethics committee of the State House? Can you imagine that? Kind of seems weird to me. And she's also the ranking member on the House Committee on Personnel and Administration. Her legislative priorities do include child safety and protection, small business, transparency and accountability in government, illegal immigration reform, and public assistance program reform with the EBT. How many of you guys saw what she did with the EBT last year? Is that not amazing what she did as a new legislator? For several years, Shauna O'Connell was working to pass Jessica's Law as part of an advocacy group called Community Voices. To quote Shauna on what motivated her to get into politics, here's what she said. She said, "Working on getting this important law passed to protect our children from child molesters opened my eyes to the need for citizen involvement, citizen representation, and the fact that one person can make a difference." A year later in 2009, she says, "I decided to run for office as a first-time candidate and was honored to be elected state representative for the 3rd Bristol District in 2010. After a tough election and several recounts, Shauna O'Connell was returned with a larger margin 2 years later and has been passionate advocate for saving taxpayers their hard-earned dollars. Among the awards that Shauna O'Connell has received, she named 2013 Best Area Politician by the readers of the Taunton Daily Gazette, the QRCC Women of the Year, Guardian of Small Business Award, the RABA Great 8 Legislators, citations for Taunton Emergency Management Agency Worker, volunteer work, and West Church Woman of the Year. Shauna O'Connell, you know, as a reporter, I talked to a lot of Democrats, I talked to a lot of Republicans. I actually have some friends who are Democrats. I actually have a lot of friends that are Republicans, and some that are even independents. But I can't think of anybody better to address this rally here today than someone who actually is on the front lines, up on Beacon Hill, down in the shadows with the Democrats, fighting every single day for public accountability, than one of our favorite state representatives, Shauna O'Connell.
Thank you very much. Hello, fellow patriots. Welcome to Boston, where it all began, where we heard the very first cries for freedom and independence. Our forefathers fought back against a government that was overreaching and overtaxing. Those of us who don't learn from history are doomed to repeat it. And now, 200 years later, we face that same fight over taxation without representation. Because the people right over there in that building, in that legislature, have passed a forever gas tax that will increase automatically so that they never have to vote on it again. They have abdicated their responsibility. And it doesn't end there. Just this week, they voted to kill debate on the House floor by prohibiting us from filing amendments to fight for more local aid back to our cities and towns. We, who have been elected by you, the people, they are telling us we can't fight for our money back. They tax us, they confiscate our money in taxes, and then they tell us we can't have it back. And you're probably thinking, geez, it couldn't get any worse. But it does. They also voted to keep us from doing any type of welfare reform during the budget debates. We know that welfare reform is an ongoing process that we have to remain vigilant about so that we ensure we are always protecting taxpayer dollars and always making sure that people who are in need get the help they need. And so what's their excuse for telling us that we can't fight for welfare reform? Well, they're telling us, we debated this last November, and they got it all right, so we don't need to ever talk about it again. So let's get this straight. The people who were forced to repeal the tech tax that they had voted on, they had to repeal it just 6 weeks later, and they got something right? I don't think so. I don't think anyone's going to fall for that. These are attacks on our rights. They do not want to be accountable. And they want to shut us up. But we will not be shut up. And this is not a Democrat or Republican problem. This is a status quo problem, and that does not belong to just one party. And there are real fighters up there, real fighters like Jim Lyons, Mark Lombardo, Jeff Deal, and we need more soldiers up there. We need more representatives elected who are not going to be go-along, get-alongs. And that is a problem that belongs to both parties. So be sure to work on a campaign this year of someone who has pledged not to be a go-along, get-along. Someone who's going to be a real fighter for you, the people. Today is Thomas Jefferson's birthday, author of the Declaration of Independence. I say that it's our declaration today to stand up to the status quo, the power structure, and put the people back in charge. Let freedom ring. It's an expression that resonates deeply with Americans, filling us with pride, patriotism, and determination. And just like our forefathers, we will not sit on the sidelines. We will not settle for the crumbs from the political table. We will fight back, we will win, and we will make Massachusetts a better place for all of our families. So thank you all for being here today. It means something. And always remember that one person can make a difference, and you are making a difference. Thank you.
Donna O'Connell! That's what I want to hear. That's what I want to hear. Before we introduce our next speaker, I want to let everybody know that we do have t-shirts available. If you'd also like to make a donation to the Tea Party, we'd certainly appreciate that. This one here is this, if you like your freedom, you can keep your, no, crossed out, must fight for your freedom. I like that. So these are how much, $15? $15 over here, you can see Christine Morabito, former president of the Greater Boston Tea Party. How about a round of applause for Christine? And because we are a little late, we're going to ask our speakers to try and keep it as brief as they can, and I guess that also means me, so we have to kill like 9 pages of my notes. Our next speaker is Dan Morris. Dan is currently attending Salem State University in Salem, Massachusetts, where he runs a local SFL chapter. Dan has long been involved in politics, attending political rallies at a very young age of 15. Ever since he learned about Gary Johnson and the libertarian cause, Dan has been active in promoting liberty and freedom for all Americans. And being the son of a federal employee, Dan has also gained insight into how ineffective the federal government can be. On Students for Liberty, here's what he says. Though I am still rather new to SFL, I am definitely not new to the organization's goals or positions. It is refreshing to see such a diverse set of other students out there spreading out across the world, embracing freedom for the individual and freedom from oppression. Even in my home state of Massachusetts, he says, where most college students identify as being far left, I have still found many fellow college students embracing the message of Ayn Rand, Ron Paul, and other activists for liberty, giving me hope that SFL can help such student voices. So let's give a very warm Tea Party welcome to our next speaker, Dan Morris. I said a warm Tea Party welcome for Dan, a warm Tea Party, a hot Tea Party welcome for Dan Morris.
How y'all doing? Good. So as I said, my name is Dan. I work with Students for Liberty, which is a 501(c) nonprofit, which is dedicated to spreading libertarianism and freedom across the world. Currently, in the United States, there are 150 of campus coordinators like myself, working at colleges from Massachusetts to California, spreading the idea that each of us is an individual who should have the right to seek their own life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. We were founded in 2008 thanks to the Ron Paul campaign, for which we owe a lot to. It empowered many of students like myself. Now, I want to open up with a, well, first off, that's our college or high school students here? One. There you go. And I brought her here too, so that doesn't count. So, I want to open up with a little story of how bad things are at college campuses across the country. One of our campus coordinators, Rob Van Turen, a student at Monsanto Junior College in California, last September, he wanted to hand out constitutions on his college campus on Constitution Day to promote his club, his Young Americans for Liberty Club. His school wouldn't let him. They said he needed a permit to hand out a copy of the law, of which we all abide by every day. Thankfully, later on, he sued his school, and a couple months ago he won, which is great, so good for him. But the problem is, that's happening on college campuses all across the country. According to the Foundation for Individual Rights in Education, 66% of colleges across this country have rules which restrict constitutional right to freedom of speech. My own school, Salem State University, has such a rule which prohibits me from annoying anyone. And if I do so, I could be reprimanded. Now, I didn't know what constitutes as annoying, but I'll be honest, I can be annoying a lot of times. But the fact is, my freedom of speech at my college is harmed when such rules are in place. Even if I don't plan on annoying anyone or insulting their heritage or whatnot, I should still have that right. The Constitution gives me that right. My school is a public university and it should abide by that right. Now thankfully I'm challenging them on that, and it's going slow, but I hope one day I'll have much progress. Now one of the best things about Students for Liberty is that we're not just American-centric. We're focused on the world. Many work with us on all continents, from Asia, Africa, and Latin America, and their stories are so empowering to hear. Currently, right now, we have students working with us in Venezuela, standing with protesters, standing against socialism. Flags in the hands, chants in the air, it's beautiful. We have students working with us in Eastern Europe, fighting for Ukraine's freedom against Putin and his aggression. And one of my favorite stories is the students in Africa, who are part of countries which have faced oppression, first from colonialism and then from their own corrupt governments. And there these people are, facing death in the face, standing against tyrants on all corners. And yet they stand. Empowering college students like myself across America and across the nation is important. Students for Liberty, Young Americans for Liberty, and other organizations work to make sure that our future is bright, because at this moment, it's not. Obamacare has made many of my friends lose their health insurance. Now, Obama thought it would be great to grant us the power to be under our parents' health insurance until 26. That sounds fine. But what happens after that? There's no jobs. Obama and his administration thinks it's great if everyone can go to college. That sounds fine and dandy, but if everyone gets a bachelor's degree, what's a bachelor's degree worth? Nothing. Unfortunately, thanks to Obama administration expanding financial aid, when I graduate in a few years, my prospects won't be glowing. They'll be dim. It's unfortunate, but at the same time, it's empowering. This gives students like myself the power to fight back. It gives us a reason to fight back. It gives us a reason to come to rallies like this and say, I'm fed up with the two-party system. I'm fed up with this administration. I'm fed up with not having a choice. I'm fed up with my voice being diminished by those in power and by those who will only ignore me no matter how loud I speak. Which is why people like you are important to me. It makes me feel like I'm not alone. It makes me feel like this is important, like I'm supported, and I know I am by folks like you. And I'm very, very grateful for that. Now, I'll tell you some of the other projects we're working on right now. We're currently, we host regional conferences. We're actually hosting a conference today in Suffolk University. If any students here besides the one I brought want to attend. It's at Suffolk University at 3:30, so very soon. Everyone's welcome to attend, student or not. Free snacks, which is important. But I'll tell you what you can do to help us. Spread the word. If you know college students, if you know high school students who feel that they're disenfranchised by the two-party system, that feel disenfranchised by everything around them, that feel fed up with the administration, that feel fed up with Beacon Hill, let them know of our existence. They can work with us, we can work with them, and we can change things. We can give students the idea that they are free individuals, that they have the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, because they do. They don't know it. We are a very libertarian generation. Everything we do is based on choice. What phone we have, what car we drive, who we add and who we delete on Facebook. We have these principles that we control our own lives. And those need to carry onto our campuses, onto Beacon Hill, and across the world, and they will. I thank you all for being here today. Again, my name is Daniel Morris, and it's proud to be here with the Tea Party. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And as we were watching TV the last couple of days, we noticed the federal government descending on the Bundy Ranch down in Nevada. Is it Nevada? I always get the states out there wrong. Wouldn't it be great if they put that much resources on our border? Wouldn't it be great if they cared more about the people sneaking into our country and stealing our services than a tortoise? Well, the next person that's going to be speaking, I think, has an awful lot to say about some of these issues. I was lucky enough to introduce her last year, and I'm going to be lucky again this year to introduce her. She's really a mover and shaker. She's another person who does stuff. And that's really important for this Tea Party movement to grow. Her name is Jessica Vaughn. I said her name is Jessica Vaughn. She serves as the Director of the Public Policy Studies for the Center on Immigration Studies. It's a Washington, D.C. based research institute that examines the impact of immigration on American society and educates policymakers and opinion leaders on immigration issues. Jessica has been with the center since 1992, and in her area of expertise is immigration policy and operation. She also does a whole bunch of other stuff, but it's like 27 pages long. We'd be here all day if I read them all. Prior to joining the center, Ms. Vaughn was the Foreign Services Officer with the State Department, where she served in Belgium, Trinidad, and Tobago. Her articles have appeared in the Washington Post, the Boston Globe, The Economist, and a whole bunch of others. She's testified before Congress several times and advises state lawmakers and agencies on immigration studies. She is frequently cited in news media reports on immigration and has appeared on NPR. NPR, really? Wow. That's an accomplishment in and of itself to get a conservative on NPR. CNN, MSNBC, Fox News, and PBS's NewsHour with Jim Lehrer. Let's give a very warm Tea Party welcome for a woman that I have a great deal of respect for, Jessica Vaughn.
Thank you all for being here today.
Thank you.
I love the theme of this year's event. If you like your freedom, you must fight for your freedom. And that's what we're all here for. Freedom is one of the main benefits to sovereign nations like the United States of America. And sovereignty is only possible if we have distinct borders. Well, I want to tell you today that if you like our borders, we're going to have to fight for our borders. This year and next year, those borders and the integrity of many of our laws, including our immigration laws, are under attack. Our borders are being breached every day. Our laws are being subtly undermined by executive action. And there's a major effort underway to permanently undermine those laws that protect American workers and keep us safe and keep our country safe. It's happening because of an alliance between those folks who want to bypass American workers, even though in the paper today I read that there are 88,000 people in Massachusetts who've been looking for a job for more than 6 months and can't find one. And that there are 4.3 million people in the rest of the country in that situation, on top of the short-term unemployed. Those are the people that our immigration laws protect. But an alliance of folks who would rather bypass American workers and instead hire folks who come in and can work under the table and work for less, in collusion with people who want to transform the United States of America and reduce the power of those who believe the things that we believe in, like fiscal responsibility and a small government, are working together to undermine our immigration laws, both at the federal level, but also by creating sanctuaries in states around the country, including the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. So what exactly are those threats? There's 3 of them that I want to tell you about. The first being, of course, comprehensive immigration reform, which is alive and well, which means an amnesty or a legalization for people who are here illegally, a doubling of guest workers, and a doubling of legal immigration. While the Gang of 8 bill that we talked about last year didn't pass, the House Republican leadership is to this day working to try to pass that bill. And the latest form of it is an attachment to our Defense Authorization Act that would tack on a small amnesty that sounds benign, but we know, because the Gang of 8 has told us, that as soon as anything with the word immigration in it gets over to the US Senate, it will be transformed into comprehensive immigration reform and sent to the president's desk. And we can't let that happen. House leadership in Washington needs to hear from patriots who don't want to see that happen, and they will back off if they hear from people. The other thing here in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, there are 2 bills that are before our legislators on Beacon Hill. One's called the Safe Driving Act. I know a lot of you here today have heard of that it has nothing to do with safety, since training is optional. This is the bill that would provide driver's licenses to not only people who are living in the Commonwealth illegally, but anybody from anywhere else in the country that would like to have a new identification. It's a slap in the face to legal immigrants, and it would make our state a magnet for illegal settlement and anybody who needs a new ID, and it would trash the integrity of our driver's license. I did see, this bill is still alive unless it's killed by the committee by May 15th. It was given an extension for further consideration. And I saw some yellow sheets being distributed. I think there's some down here on the table that give you some information on the bill and tell you who to call, who to write, who to let know what you think about this bill and what it would do to our state. The other one is something called, another misnomer, it's called the Trust Act. The point of the Trust Act is to negate the Secure Communities program, which many of you worked on and fought hard to establish here in our state. It basically would prohibit information sharing between local police and sheriffs and federal authorities on people, illegal immigrants and non-citizens who are here and who commit crimes, and make sure that only those who've done at least 5 years in prison would ever be deported. This would forbid the kind of communication that we all knew was lacking in the response to last year's attacks and that we can't afford to undermine. This law, the Trust Act, is unconstitutional and it's a violation of federal law, but that doesn't mean it won't pass on Beacon Hill, because it's already passed one committee and is now before 2 others, before the Judiciary Committee and the Senate Ways and Means Committee. And again, those folks need to hear from you that we want our communities protected, and we want our law enforcement agencies to communicate with the feds and work together to keep us, all of us in our communities safe. These bills to make Massachusetts a sanctuary are all happening in the context of a significant decline in immigration enforcement nationwide. That's the result of the deliberate suppression of enforcement by Obama administration policies. We know now from their own documents that they are releasing more illegal immigrants that they've sent federal agents out to talk to than they are trying to deport, and that resulted in the release of 68,000 criminal non-citizens last year back into our communities. New England has a slightly better record here. It's only about half that they're releasing. But I tell you, several days ago I was in Washington and I had the privilege of being with people who unfortunately have experienced very personally what a relaxation in immigration enforcement means to their families. It's called the Remembrance Project. And I went with them to a demonstration on the National Mall in Washington, D.C., where there was a vigil being held along the theme of not one more deportation, saying that the president needs to stop all deportations of people who are here illegally because it's breaking up families. But the families that I was standing with are all families who have lost loved ones, who were killed often by a drunk driver who was here in this country illegally and driving without a license. And they know very personally that it's more than the $10 billion in our tax money that the federal government spends each year on illegal immigrants. And it's more than the $1.9 billion of our tax money that is spent just in our state because of this problem. But these are the family members, people like Matt Denise of Milford, Drew Rosenberg of San Francisco, Jameel Shaw of Los Angeles, Dominic Durden of Riverside, California, Sister Denise Mosier of Virginia, Lauren Bump of San Antonio, Zane Thurber of Utah, Louise Solomon of Omaha, Nebraska, all lost their lives, and their families deserve our attention as well and deserve to have a voice in this debate. A prominent politician that we've all heard of recently referred to illegal immigration as an act of love. Let's show our love for American families who've been harmed by this phenomenon, and show our love for those people who've lost their livelihoods or their jobs or their wages because of our government's refusal to work on this problem. Let's show our love for our country and our tradition of the rule of law by telling our lawmakers what needs to happen, how they should vote, what kinds of laws they should be passing and considering. Let's protect our freedom, and I thank you for being here because that shows your willingness to fight for our country and to fight for our freedom. Keep it up. We need you now. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jessica. Want to just remind everybody that we have t-shirts. If you'd like to make a donation, they're $15. If you want to make a donation and you don't want a t-shirt, we'll be happy to take your money. That'd be great. Thank you. Our next speaker is another speaker who was here last year, and I was very honored to be able to introduce her. I've also been able to communicate with her over the last year, and we even sat down and participated in a documentary about the Tea Party, which is supposed to be, I think, coming out like in May. Is that correct? Yeah? In May, about the Tea Party. Is there anybody here from the mainstream media? I saw somebody, there's somebody in the periphery here somewhere from the mainstream media. We're not going to denigrate you, I just want to know if you're here. Isn't that interesting? Isn't that interesting? The mainstream media that goes out of their way to define us doesn't even come to hear what we have to say. Isn't that interesting? Wow. Remind them of that the next time a member of the mainstream media calls you or comes over to you on election day and asks you your opinion. Ask them where they were on tax day on when the Boston Common Rally happened.
Valley Patriot's here.
Valley Patriot is here, that's correct. Thank you, sir. Our next speaker is Catherine White. Over 5 years ago, she started a book club to read W. Cleon Skousen's The 5,000-Year Leap. Did I pronounce that right? Wow, first shot. Out of that grew the U.S. Constitution Study Group that now sees attendance of about 40 people each month. She also coordinates an ever-increasing schedule of lectures, talks, study groups, and events, all centered on teaching the amazing document that is the supreme law of this land, the United States Constitution. That's where you're supposed to clap. You can read her articles and watch videos on her website, constitutiondecoded.com, and there's a contact link there if you want more information. Please give a very warm Tea Party welcome to one of our soldiers on the front line fighting for our Constitution, Catherine White. A warm Tea Party welcome. I'm going to get you guys by the end of the day.
Well, thank you, everybody, and happy birthday to Thomas Jefferson, who wrote the Declaration of Independence. Alexander Hamilton wrote in 1775, "The sacred rights of mankind are not to be rummaged for among old parchments or musty records. They are written, as with a sunbeam, in the whole volume of human nature by the hand of divinity itself, and can never be erased or obscured by mortal power." Constitutional conservatives, in upholding the document that is the supreme law of the land, are slandered and defamed by the media and by politicians as evil haters who want to return to the days of slavery and inequality. The names these liars attribute to us rightfully belong to themselves. What we wish to conserve and to reinstate is the most radical, most beautiful, most empowering, most justice-bringing, most equality-spreading, most freedom-loving principle that has ever been used as the foundation of civil governance. understand with truth and spirit, viscerally, what that principle is, because it is imperative for the power-hungry rulers on the left and the right that we none of us realize the power inherent in that principle. From the Declaration of Independence, from the first draft, you will hear the difference. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, and they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, and among these are life, liberty, and property. That to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. That whenever any form of government becomes destructive of these ends, it is the right and the duty of the people to alter or to abolish it, or to reinstate it. This principle they based on the laws of nature and of nature's God. Cicero stated that natural law was true law in accordance with the rules of the universe, and that law built on any foundation but natural law would ultimately fail. So what is this really saying to us today? It says that our rights are natural, absolute, inherent, and inseparable. They come to us from God and are ours by virtue of our humanity. That our rights predate, transcend, and supersede the Constitution. No rights are granted by the Constitution. We, the people, established and ordained the Constitution and the federal government. We gave that government limited areas of legal action. That government has absolutely no say in what is or is not a natural human right.
All right.
And that the sole legitimate purpose of civil government is to protect our rights. It cannot create them, it can only secure them or try to limit them. Rights, life, that we have, may keep, and may live and protect our lives free from interference by civil government in our day-to-day affairs, provided only that we do not infringe on the equal rights of others. Liberty. Jefferson said it is unobstructed action according to our will, that we may do as we please with our efforts, ourselves, and the products of our efforts. Property. To keep what we have put our efforts into for our own purposes, and to give that property to others as we see fit during our lives and upon our deaths. And explicit in the Declaration of Independence, the right not to consent when the government that we created has outgrown the boundaries we set and assumes for itself powers and sovereignty that rightfully belong to we, the people. How can we determine if something is a natural or God-given right? Each one may be held and enjoyed at no expense or loss to any other person, and they are not subject to interpretation by others. Our rights are limited only by the equal rights of others. And since we do not have the right... We will talk later, sir. Our rights are limited only by the equal rights of others. And since we do not have the right to commit unjust acts that infringe on the rights of others, we may not ask or demand or allow government to commit unjust acts on our behalf, nor excuse violations on the part of government. No person is fundamentally entitled to rule another. Yet the leaders on Beacon Hill and in Washington believe we are too ignorant, too careless, or too corrupt to make good decisions for ourselves. Were that true, It's all the more reason not to trust them with that power over others, for they also are humans and no better nor wiser than any one of us. The principle of consent also restricts government. At the end of the Declaration, it says that the United States may do all other acts and things which independent states may of right do. So it may freely act, but only in those areas where it has legitimately been given the power to act by the Constitution. So some will now say, well, that proves it. Conservatives hate the poor and the sick. Wrong. The other side of rights is responsibilities. And it is the responsibility of each one of us to make sure that the poor and the sick have two things. Number one, any immediate aid they truly need. And number two, an avenue for them to make their own lives better. This can only be properly done at the local level. Even a state is too careless and too callous to fulfill that responsibility properly. Just ask the Pelletier family. But you have to make the rich help or they won't. Wrong again. Look at private foundations, educational funds, and medical institutions set up by the very wealthy. As for those who give nothing, there's either a moral education problem or there is an assumption that the government will take care of it. The first must be addressed at the individual moral and ethical level. The second is solved the instant we get government fingers out of the charitable pie. All men are created equal. Equal in rights, to develop their own God-given talents and to shape their lives as they wish, not as government, social class, or church dictate. To fail when need be, as that is where stronger growth is born. Equal under the law, whether CEO, president, or a 15-year-old with a rare disease, that we are certain of being held under terms of law rather than by whim, treated according to how powerful one's friends are seen to be. The freedom to become is the essence of America. That freedom to grow, to improve, to take risks, to fail, and to try again has made us a beacon for anyone seeking a better life. It brought us to the moon and back. It fuels our innovation in every field: science, medicine, art, engineering, commerce. That is the freedom that our misled friends on the left actually want for the groups they see as downtrodden victims. If they would open their eyes, they would see that we want those freedoms for everyone, not just the privileged elite in DC, Beacon Hill, and boardrooms. And they would join us en masse. It's the power-hungry leadership on the left and the right that do not want that freedom for any of us. Yet those power-hungry leaders in Washington and the state capitals use and twist the words advancement, justice, and freedom to pursue their real agenda, the subjugation of all but themselves and their friends. They will say that the Declaration and the Constitution are outdated, the words of dead white slave owners, that rights come from government, that natural law is just an obsolete interpretation. They are utterly wrong and intellectually dishonest, as their posturings are full of internal contradictions. The Declaration puts forth the principles upon which this country is founded, and it was incorporated by the first act of Congress as part of the organic laws of the United States. Its vision informs the entirety of our Constitution, and it is the standard against which all government acts must be judged. Does this proposal secure our rights, or does it seek to infringe those rights? Massachusetts abolitionist Senator Charles Sumner said, "The Declaration is the illuminated initial letter of our history, the national heart, the national soul, the national will, the national voice, which must inspire our interpretation of the Constitution. Thank you.
Thank you, Catherine. Is this on? Oh, there it is. Very good. Our next speaker is a guy that I have an awful lot of respect for. I've listened to him for years on WRKO. His name is Todd Feinberg. I think what I said was that his name is Todd Feinberg. Right now he hosts J4Traffic.com. It's a traffic radio. It's traffic radio for Boston on the internet. Todd spent 10 years at WRKO. He also spent a few years at WBZ. And I can tell you that he's not just a guy that goes on the radio and then goes home. He's a guy that goes on the radio, he does his own thing, and then when he leaves, he gets involved and he actually does stuff. And again, I know that this is keeping in line with everything that we've been talking about today. I can't wait to hear what he has to say, because every time I've ever listened to him on the radio, as informed as I think I am being in the media myself, I always learn something. So let's give a very warm round of applause, very warm Tea Party round of applause for my good buddy Todd Feinberg.
Are you going to go a very warm Tea Party? Welcome. Actually, I don't even leave the house when I do radio now, because I'm just doing it from the basement. Because it's mobile radio, homemade. So how's everybody? I have to say, this is great, but I loved it a few years ago when I was standing here and Sarah Palin was standing about right there. And I was looking at her from behind. When was that? Anybody remember? Was that like 4 years ago? Huh? 2010, 4 years ago. Where is Sarah when we need her? So I think about the Constitution all the time, not the way the previous speaker did. I'm more in the abstract realm. I like listening to people who are literal about it, because then I put all that stuff in. But what it's come down to for me now is it's a very practical thing. What the founders understood was that all power is dangerous. All consolidated power is dangerous. If there's 5 people who are trying to make a base of power, they start getting corrupt right off the bat. They start making bad decisions, they start hoarding power and shoving it off in little places for their own benefit. And the founders knew that power was just a dangerous thing. They knew that consolidating power is what human beings want to do, and if you want to have liberty, that is, let's just talk about liberty for a minute in an economic model, because this is one of my revelations recently, that liberty is actually about free markets. It's not about political liberty. Political liberty you need in order to make sure people don't steal away the free markets with their consolidated power. Free markets are where we get to express ourselves and build the world we want to build. So in the ideal world, all of us has one vote every day. You know, it's like our money. We go out in the streets with our money and we vote for what kind of land we're going to have. And the businesses we go to grow, and the ones we don't go to don't grow, and we've created the kind of world we want. And then along come the poachers, the thieves, and they see somebody making a lot of money and they say, geez, they're making a lot of money. We should probably take some of that money. And that's called government. And this is really what the founders understood, that anything good that's going to happen, i.e. a market expressing itself, a business making money, all good in our society comes from business, because business creates jobs and creates wealth. And that's how we get to live our lives. True or false? Some people would argue, oh no, it comes from schools and education, or it comes from church, but you can't have anything until you have commerce. So the ideal situation is a commerce-driven society in which you have as little government as possible. Common sense, right? That's what we got handed. But then the poachers see all the money going by, and they start corrupting. And that's what everything Washington does now. I listen to anybody in Washington, but particularly the White House, anything the president says, and it's all cloaked language, designed to say underneath the surface in code, I plan on taking what you got. And that's why we don't have the American system anymore. That's why we no longer have states. That's why some liberals actually sit around and say, you know, states are kind of obsolete. We don't need these governors anymore, because all governors do, they're kind of useless. All they do is take the money that we send them from Washington. That's how entirely corrupted this thing has become. So I offer this to you because I find it very helpful to just look at everything this way. If you ever talk to liberals, hate big government too, you know. They don't trust government to fight wars. They don't trust government to have police, right? They don't trust government with the death penalty. They think government can't be trusted, except they want government controlling all of education. Why is that? They don't want markets controlling energy. They think instead of buying energy from hydro plants in Canada for 8 cents a kilowatt hour, we should be paying 25 cents per kilowatt hour to build our own windmills out in the ocean. Why is that? It's got nothing to do with good policy. It's just poachers in Washington trying to steal, trying to consolidate power. How you doing, Barbara? Did everyone listen to Barbara Anderson? She's awesome, isn't she? She's consolidating a lot of power, though. Watch out for her. Just kidding. Anyway, that's the theory upon which I now operate. Consolidated power is really what it's all about. Every inch of the Constitution is about how do you leave the power in the hands of individuals and make sure it's not being robbed to your town government, to your state government, but worst of all, the one thing they wanted to guarantee could never happen in our society is it can't get robbed to Washington. And now they rob everything they can get their hands on at the drop of a dime. And then the representatives we elect run around all happy they get to hand it out to us, like they've accomplished something. Because they've stolen, after Washington takes its VIG, they've stolen a little bit of our money back for us. And we're supposed to be happy. Politicians are exploiting smokers. Well, of course they are. That's because they're politicians and you exist. That's how it works. That's a good sign right there. And you could have a little scroll going with every noun in the world. Politicians are exploiting everybody. The one that pisses me off most now is this education thing, this Common Core. I mean, it's just a blatant theft of something that belongs to the states that will make education worse by definition, right? We're Massachusetts. They say we've got the #1 education system in the country. What happens when that gets to Washington? By definition, it's not going to be, they're not going to take #1 and say, everybody be like #1. There'd be a lot of hate on Washington if they did that. They have to go down to number 25 and force everyone to be at least as good as number 25, or okay, maybe number 20, or maybe number 30. You know, it won't be anywhere near our standards. Why should we put up with this? Consolidated power, that's my thought for the day. All right? Is anyone alive out there? Okay, good. All right, check out my mobile radio project. I will soon be doing a political talk radio station on mobile. The world of radio is going over to mobile, just like like newspapers went to the internet. Check out j4traffic.com. That's my all-traffic radio station. There's much more. There's politics coming, all kinds of different things. All right? And read Duggan's newspaper, all right? Have you checked it out? It's the best. Why didn't they hire you to run the Globe? I hope so. You know, if they want to sell papers, you've got the model. It's not complicated. So why don't they do it?
They go on an agenda and we just go by free speech.
Jeez, it's not complicated. All right, I'm done. You want to come up? Bye-bye, everybody. Thank you.
My buddy, Todd Feinberg. Thank you, Todd. And I know I owe you a phone call from 8 months ago, and I promise you I will call you back.
You're a busy man.
I misspoke a little earlier, and it was not my fault. I asked if anybody was here from the mainstream media, and nobody raised their hand, but the girl from the Globe is here. She's a photographer. I don't know if she's also a reporter. But don't be shy. It's okay. And also, please, don't like look for like the person that looks like who might be the craziest person here to interview. We appreciate that. You know what I'm saying? We're glad to have the media here. I wish more media was here because I think it's important for them to hear what we have to say from us and not demonize us and mischaracterize us and label and stereotype us. Our next speaker, I'm going to take her out of order because she's got a time issue. I remember back in 1977, I was just a young budding lad back then, when Barbara Anderson started Citizens for Limited Taxation. Does everybody remember that? What a huge difference that made here in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, didn't it? Barbara is now the Executive Director of Citizens for Limited Taxation. She attended Penn State University. Early on, she had been a lifeguard and a swimming instructor. She's been in Massachusetts since 1971, and she currently lives in Marblehead. She started with Citizens for Limited Taxation as a back in 1977, and I remember that. Because my friend from Methuen worked with, I won't mention his name, but my friend from Methuen worked with her at that time. And that's how I ended up meeting her. She helped to gather 4,800 signatures on a petition in this state to limit our taxes, and then became an administrative assistant for CLT. And from 1980 on, she has been the executive director. She's been a columnist, formerly for the Patriot Ledger, not to be confused with the Valley Patriot, we're a real newspaper. And she's now a weekly columnist for the Salem News Eagle, really? Eagle Tribune Broadcasting? The Salem News Eagle Tribune News Group. She also co-hosted programs with Jerry Williams and Howie Carr in the 1980s and the 1990s. She's been on commissions for Governor King, Governor Weld, Cellucci, on government restructuring, funding, fiscal policy. She's on the board of directors for the National Taxpayers Union, and in 1999 she was the recipient of the 4th Lifetime Tax Fighter Award from the Howard Jarvis Taxpayer Association. Someone who really does a lot of stuff and really does go out and do the work, Barbara Anderson.
Thank you very much. I'm glad we went back into the past there for a little while. First of all, it reminds everybody that I'm old enough to know what I'm doing. And it's because some of you are too young to remember, and therefore might be getting discouraged at the way things are going now. And I think we might as well talk a little bit about reality here. I know we have to do the rah-rah and we have to do the education, but the truth is, a lot of people who were members of the Tea Party and who came to these big rallies aren't here today. And I think a lot of them are discouraged, or they're so afraid that they just want to think about something else, and so they aren't here with us. And we have to get those people back. And one way to do that is to remind people that it's important to remember that when times are like these, there have always been times like these. I remember 1980, right after I'd gone to work for Citizens for Limited Taxation, Jimmy Carter years, double-digit inflation, interest rates, misery index, gas prices out of control. And some people, I'm not going to name names, but I know one woman who was keeping SpaghettiOs under the bed so she could feed her teenage son when the whole system collapsed. That was the mindset back then, and I know it sounds familiar to people perhaps today. When we moved from Danvers to Marblehead, it was very hard to move all those cans of SpaghettiOs, which we eventually ate. But in 1980, when things were at their worst and everyone was thinking it was pretty much the end of America as we know it, in November 4th, 1982, things happened. Governor Reagan, Ronald Reagan, became the President of the United States. And that same night, we were down the street at one of the hotels waiting for the returns to come in on Proposition 2.5. At that time, property taxes in Massachusetts were the highest in the world. And on November 4th, Ronald Reagan won, we won, everything turned around. The next few years were years of prosperity and tax limitation and power to the people. And everyone forgot about the misery index of 1979. That was one of the most exciting evenings of my political life. The next most exciting event of my political life happened in 2007-8. Again, things were looking bad, things are starting to fall apart, and this thing called the Tea Party came along. Now, under the layers I've been trying to keep warming is my original Tea Party t-shirt that I got at one of the earliest events that I wear a lot. And I thought, well, we as Citizens for Limited Taxation, we were aware of the Tea Party because we've been Tea Partiers since the beginning. We used to go down to the harbor with a whole bunch of different people every year. Newt Gingrich was there with us one year. Grover Norquist from Americans for Tax Return. We all were down there throwing the tea in the harbor. Bill Weld, Paul Salucci. Everyone was always down there throwing tea into the harbor. Thank heavens that got old. We're not doing that today. But the concept was there for us all along. We were Tea Partiers back then. But by the early 2000s, it was getting pretty lonely out there as taxpayer activists. And suddenly the Tea Party came along. And I don't know what you all like to call yourselves, patriots, constitutionalists. We called you reinforcements. It was like being at the Alamo. And you know what it was like at the Alamo, and help wasn't coming, and Davy Crockett, they were all gonna die. But just imagine if someone up in the fort had said, look, here comes the Tea Party. And that's how we felt, finding reinforcements, and it was so exciting for a few years. And the Tea Party was there to fight with us and for us, and we are very grateful to all of you, even those of you who just became active in politics at that time. There are a lot of people here who are Citizens for Limited Taxation members, and you know everything you need to know about politics, but the Tea Party was there to learn and become part of us, and we are very grateful to that. I'm not here really so much to give you information about taxes. The one wonderful thing about Citizens for Limited Taxation, as opposed to, say, the Republican Party, is we are unified on our issue. Every single member of Citizens for Limited Taxation believes in limited taxation. Otherwise, why would they join us? All the Republicans I know believe in limited taxation. Every Tea Partier I know believes in limited taxation. We don't fight among ourselves about our issue because our issue is a solid center for everything that everyone else is doing. Because while taxes are a problem, monetarily problem, and money that we don't get to spend ourselves, the real thing about taxes, as other speakers have said here today, is taxes are the power that make government big. And the bigger they get, the more of a problem they are for us. So we limit taxes not so much to keep our own money, but to keep them from getting too much power. And the only thing you have to remember about taxes, the latest information which I made sure I got for you today that just comes out in April from the Tax Foundation, is that we have the 5th highest per capita tax burden in the country. So no matter what you hear about how we're not doing this, and we need more money for that, we need a gas tax increase, we need this, we have the 5th highest per capita tax burden in the United States of America. So we have plenty of money. That isn't our problem. We all know what our problem is. It's a governor who doesn't know how to manage any state agency. And legislature, of course, that thinks it doesn't have to debate welfare reform in the middle of the budget debates. So we know what the problems are. Now that I've gotten out the information, and then you need anything else about taxes, go to our website, Citizens for Limited Taxation, just Google it, and you can catch up on anything that's going on in the state relative to taxes, and everything's relative to taxes. But I think my being the keynote speaker means that I'm supposed to go a little farther than just using my issue, explaining my issue, making sure everybody here is reminded of what's going on, and doing the rah-rah and the optimism, and someday things are going to get better. I think I have to have a plan. I think that's why I'm here. I think I'm supposed to have a plan. And I do. And I want everyone from all these different groups that have been speaking today to focus on this, because it's a plan for all of us. It's called the undecided voter. Now, I've been paying close attention to what's been going on the last couple of years, saying what's different now, what really isn't working. That worked for us back with Prop 2.5 and in 2000 when we did the income tax rollback. What worked for us is people were paying attention. Back in 1980, when we did Proposition 2.5, there was conservative talk radio from early in the morning till late at night and on weekends. There were 4 major talk radio stations in Boston, statewide stations. Almost every community our little series of communities had their own radio station, and all of those would have a talk show every now and then. I used to do them. I'd go all over the state doing talk radio. Newspapers back then were big and carried our issues. If we were doing something, any of us doing something, there'd be pages of information about it. When we did Prop 2.5, the Globe ran a story every day for 2 weeks on different sections of 2.5, analyzing it, giving the pros and the cons. Now when you do a ballot question, you're lucky they mention you're out there getting signatures. People aren't paying attention. They aren't reading the newspapers. They aren't watching one of the 4 television stations we had back then. When I used to do a television interview, I'd maybe have 4 or 5 minutes on a 10-minute segment. Now if you see me on television, you will hear me say 20 words in a segment that is 30 seconds. And while we're speaking, at the bottom of the television screen, they're running, I don't know, next day's news or what's coming up on the next show. So the attention is so scattered now, and people don't have time to go to rallies, and they have so many rallies to go to, and there's so much going on that I think that's why people get despair. Even those of us who are activists don't know what to do next. So for this coming election, which has been said before, is the most important in our history since 1980 at least, and maybe even more important because I'm not sure it's going to be that easy to come back as it might have been in the past because of the scattered attention. This election in 2014 and then 2016 is going to decide whether we keep America or not. Now, of course, we're a taxpayer group at the local level, but it's no point in kidding ourselves. If the country doesn't survive, nothing we're going to do for you. So we're very focused, too, on the tax issues nationally and on all the other issues nationally. And we know that we have to win. In 2014, we have to take the U.S. Senate, keep the House. That's what we have to do for all of our issues. And in 2016, we need a president. And how are we going to do this? Here is my plan, and it's 3 words that I want everyone to please remember. The undecided voter. Because all of us, we know so much. And every time we run into an undecided voter, we want him or her to understand everything we know. So we give them the 10 or the 20-minute lecture or speech, the things you've been hearing today. You have to understand all about Common Core. Well, they're not going to stand there for half an hour to understand all about Common Core, or about the latest tax issues, or the Constitution, or all the things that we know, so we can start right with the middle of the conversation and then go on to our point of view and maybe some little disparities we have here and there. The undecided voter doesn't know anything about anything, and yet he is going to vote. Now, I'm not talking about people who don't vote. If there's one group of people in the country who don't count at all with any of us, it's the non-voter. If they don't vote, if they're apathetic, what do we have to do with them? Do we really want to spend half an hour trying to convince them to vote? This is not the League of Women Voters here. We would rather people didn't vote if they don't know what they're talking about, and most people don't. But if they're going to vote, then they have to know something, understand something about what we're talking about. And I think if they're Americans, and they should be Americans to vote, they have an instinctive understanding of what we're talking about. Some of them are older and they actually learned about the Constitution in school. But Americans, as Americans, genetically understand about freedom. And the fact that they're not hearing that out there in the media and they're not hearing it in school doesn't change the way they are. So they just need us to reach them with a simple message that resonates with what they are, and then we take them to vote the way we want them to vote. So every one of us, when we're talking about our issues or our candidates, have to have in our mind not the other people in our organizations who know everything we know, or other political activists who quickly understand what we know. We have to keep in the back of our minds the undecided voter and keep our message so simple, because you're not going to teach them everything you know. So simple that they will relate to it. And I'm listening to the speeches here today and I'm thinking, okay, take Common Core. I listened to a presentation on Common Core for a couple of hours, at several different places before I understood the problem. And when I understood it, it was perfectly clear to me. And it's one sentence. You're going to turn education over to who? The federal government? The ones who did Obamacare? And that's it. That's all we can really do in the minute we're going to have with that voter. When we did Proposition 2.5, here was the message. Property taxes are too high and we're going to fix them. That's it. I went out there and said that over and over and over again for the 4 months of the campaign. Property taxes are too high and we're going to fix them. When we did the income tax rollback in 2000, we didn't talk about the complexity of the tax code and how it affects the working environment and business and that. All we said was the legislature and governor, last governor, Dukakis, promised that the income tax increase would be temporary. It has been 12 years, and we still are paying that income tax. We called our campaign a promise to keep, and that's what we focused on. Focus is what we have to have. We can't educate the entire population. Even back when they were paying attention and we had 3 television stations and 40 different talk shows, we couldn't educate everybody. Certainly can't do it now. We have to find the one sentence, the one thing that resonates with them, that everyone can understand, and go out there and say it. And I think today the Tea Party came up with it. If you like your freedom, you can keep your freedom if you fight for it. Because you notice all the speakers here today, most of them were using some variation on that. If you like your borders, you should keep your borders. And that phrase that comes from the biggest mistake made by President Obama, lying to us about if we could keep our health care, if we liked it, we could keep it. We can all use that over and over again to make our message clear and get all the people in the country who have heard that one message, if you like your health care, you can keep your health care. Get those people to relate that message to what our message is so that they see us all as one unity of somebody who wants to keep America the way America is supposed to be. And the Tea Party is going to lead on that. Citizens for Limited Taxation will be right there, as we always have been, and so will all of your groups and all of you. So thank you very much for coming today.
Thank you, Barbara. How about a little bit more of applause for Barbara? All the years and years and years of hard work. A Tea Party member before there was a Tea Party. Well, the sun has come out, and I think that's pretty appropriate. It's a little nicer than it was earlier. Looks like a few more people have joined us. Welcome.